Good afternoon and welcome to this really special Screen Talk, the largest we've ever had by a mile, I think. A huge thanks to Apple TV Plus for their help in making this dream come true. It's really been a dream come true for lots of us. My name's Ben Roberts. I'm the Chief Executive of the BFI. You don't really want to hear from me, so I've only got 2 cards, don't worry. I'd like to just briefly explain, though, why this event is so particularly special to us at the BFI. We're all actually indebted to Martin Scorsese's passionate championing of cinema, the art form, the experience, of filmmakers, of our cinema heritage, and the particular significance of our British cinema heritage. Edgar Wright, who's about to come on in a moment, spent his lockdown in a quarantine movie club on WhatsApp with Quentin Tarantino, who didn't. And that was inspired by a voicemail he received from Martin Scorsese listing 50 influential British films. And for many years, Mr. Scorsese has been a really invaluable supporter of our restoration work at the BFI National Archive via his Film Foundation. With huge thanks to the Film Foundation, we're screening a restoration of Sir Horace Ove's Pressure during this festival on Wednesday and Thursday next week. And our restoration of I Know Where I'm Going will screen as part of The Creative Worlds of Powell and Pressburger, which is a major season that we're mounting to celebrate 2 of the giants of British cinema, which opens at the BFI immediately after the festival. And for an exhibition that's accompanying that season, Mr. Scorsese has kindly loaned us Moira Shearer's red shoes. Yes, those red shoes. So come and see them next month. So we all have many reasons to thank Mr. Scorsese, but not least for his really extraordinary body of work, including Killers of the Flower Moon, which some of us have the joy to watch this afternoon. So now, it is my great pleasure to welcome filmmaker and BFI Governor, Edgar Wright.
Hello. It would have been nice to have done this in a bigger room and on a hotter day. But I'm going to keep this short because you haven't come here to see me talk, and we want to have as much time with the man himself. So just by way of introduction, let's list just some of his credits. Mean Streets, Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, Taxi Driver, New York, New York, Raging Bull, The King of Comedy, After Hours, The Color of Money, The Last Temptation of Christ, Goodfellas, Cape Fear, The Age of Innocence, Casino, Kundun, Bringing Out the Dead, Gangs of New York, The Aviator, The Departed, Shutter Island, Hugo, The Wolf of Wall Street, Silence, The Irishman, and tonight's gala, Killers of the Flower Moon. Not too shabby. Please be upstanding, not just one of the greatest living film directors, one of the greatest film directors, full stop, Mr. Martin Scorsese.
Thank you so much. Wow. It's amazing. Look at this place. Wow. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. My goodness. Woo. Wow. Ooh, that woke me up. Okay.
Now, obviously, we only have an hour to chat, and as you know, I could spend 60 minutes on after.
We've already done, yeah.
I could do 60 minutes just on After Hours, but we're going to try and cover your entire life and career as best we can. But before we talk about your films, I'd like to discuss other people's films, because as Ben was saying before, I've always been so impressed at what you give back to cinema, not just in terms of supporting work by new directors, distributing world cinema to a wider audience, restoring classics, or just discussing your own favorite films that have influenced you. What does it mean to spread your love of cinema to others?
Well, I think for me, I naturally had an enthusiasm to want to share an experience with other people. And whether that's a performance that you see in theater, or for me, it was not necessarily theater because I came from a background we couldn't afford to go to theater. So it was in cinema or movie theaters at the time in the 40s and 50s. Into the early 60s. So I had an enthusiasm, really, and I wanted somebody to share that and enjoy it with he or she all together, you know? And I also found that at a certain point, when I started to make short films and everything, or get others interested in the same films I was interested in, and there'd be discussions and arguments, and something would come out of that. But primarily, by the time I did Mean Streets and other films, I began to get very, very excited by sharing as much as possible my experience with younger filmmakers. And then when they came back and showed me their films, when I saw their films, and I know that, and I had a kind of almost a little bit of a feeling of pride that I influenced a couple of people by not necessarily my films, by recommending other films. And then from their films, I get re-inspired. It opens up a whole world. You know, it could be light years different from what I do, but I don't care, you know. But I still have that. I have no, I always thought of myself more as a teacher than as a filmmaker.
And you also have a very omnivorous appetite for film. I don't think you're elitist in any way. And I love that you will mention Hammer horror movies in the same breath as Powell and Pressburger, or Mario Bava in the same breath as Max Ophüls.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. Well, I had no, because of the 1945 contracting asthma, I was sheltered a great deal, and they put me in movie theaters, and then later on I was in the Catholic school and went to church, and they were the two safest places. For me, I had no prejudice, or not prejudice, the wrong word, but I had no expectations. In those days, too, you just went to the movies. And whether it was good or bad, you know, it was up to you. I mean, for example, if I saw at the age of 12 Magnificent Obsession by Douglas Sirk, I didn't get it. It took me 20 years later, you see. But on the other hand, you know, I see A Place in the Sun, and I see, practically The Heiress, and the Bad and the Beautiful, and Sunset Boulevard, and films of that all around the same time. And I had that experience. So if you're looking at Sunset Boulevard, Sunset Boulevard's kind of a horror film, so I shouldn't say that, but in a good way. But I mean, at the same time, you go to a smaller theater that had these wooden seats, and you know, it was dirty, and there was a lot of gum on the floor and that sort of thing. For children, that cost 13 cents at the time, and you would see, you know, Bomba the Jungle Boy and a film called Great White Hunter. But it turns out that you think you're going to, at 10 or 11 years old, see another adventure in darkest Africa and that sort of thing. Instead, what comes up is The Macomber Affair, directed by Zoltan Korda. And that's based on an Aldous Huxley story, The Gioconda Smile. And it stars Gregory Peck and Robert Preston and Joan Bennett, with the score by Miklos Rozsa. And it's psychologically disturbing film. But it was advertised as Great White Hunter because they had to re-release it. And so you never knew what you're going to see repeatedly. The Big Heat by Fritz Lang, Murder by Contract, what I'm getting at is that it seemed that we were able to absorb different kinds of films, and we weren't necessarily told, now this is a special film, this you have to really pay attention, sort of like Eat Your Spinach, you know.
You're just going to the
movies. We
movie.
were just going to the movies.
Yeah.
I mean, later on, yes, there was a certain thing we're saying this is a special picture, even like, to a certain extent, like Shane, for example. I was 12 years old, and we knew that was special, you know, and it does hold up. It's a beautiful film. So that, along with the Italian films that I saw when I was growing up, I was 5 or 6, with the Italian neorealist films on television in New York, and sharing that with my family, sharing it. I mean, I was there. They came on TV and with the subtitles, and they were speaking in television the same way my grandparents were speaking, and I saw my grandparents reacting, and I realized we're them. But it's movies, but it's a different kind of movie. And similar with the British cinema at that time. We saw so much of Korda films, and not the early Hammer, was later, but late 40s, a great deal of quarter was sold to American television. So we just grew up with, for example, The Private Lives of Henry VIII, and that was restored ultimately by, I think, the Film Foundation at some point. But what I'm getting at is that I was getting all these other senses of a sense of other cultures coming in through the cinema, so that it opened me up to all kinds of cinema. Particularly when I saw, for example, I was maybe 15 when I saw Pate Panchali on television in New York, dubbed in English, and I realized, I always tell this story, I realized, because I had loved Renoir's film The River, and I saw it when I was about 10 or 11, and I realized this was a film made by the people in that film who are usually in the background. And it was made by them, for them. And in so doing, the whole world. And so that, in a way, being open to all kinds of cinema, even if it was the American underground cinema, you know, Stan Brakhage and early Shirley Clark, or Michael Snow's Wavelength, or these, just be open to it. I would have friends who would get angry. I said, no, just try to go with it. And so not necessarily making films like that, but being around that creativity was quite extraordinary in the New York Underground, for example, especially at the New York Film Festival. So it was really a matter of being open to all cultures and all ways of thinking and all ways of telling a story with pictures. And that, for me, eliminated. I remember telling some wonderful Italian filmmakers whom I loved that I liked Mario Bava. They were furious at me. They were furious. And no, like the color and this and that, that's horrible trash. But I didn't understand the Italian culture. And when I did, it was the 70s. I didn't quite get it. You know, I'm still American. I didn't grow up with them. I didn't grow up. Their families would have poets in their families and great philosophers. I hadn't read Manzoni until only a few months ago, because it's a new translation.
Just to jump back a little bit after your first trip to the cinema.
It's a long trip there.
No.
Oh, sorry about that.
As you can tell, I could just sit here and listen to you for the full hour. But could you talk about...
You know, I've been traveling a lot, guys. I am getting old, all right?
We're happy just to listen. Listen, I wanted to ask about, before like making films, your first, after your formative cinema trips, your first foray into storytelling by drawing what you'd seen on the big screen and showing it to other people, or maybe it was just one person. Is that correct?
Yes. I made my own, well, now they're called storyboards, but I made my own frames. And I especially became interested when it went to anamorphic 255, not 235, but wider and thinner. Yeah. And but I still had 133, and I made my own stories up, and I did shot by shot as much as possible. The earliest ones I destroyed, but this was, you got to understand, this is a tenement apartment in the Lower East Side, which is now a very chic area at Elizabeth Street and Mott Street, but at that time was pretty much lower class, working class. I don't even know, a lot of it was working class, but a lot of it was really street stuff, and it was a rough place. And so if I was drawing little pictures, I had to do that privately. You know what I mean? And you couldn't show it to everybody, you know, and especially not my parents. You know. So I began to make these stories, and some of them I took from watching television, half-hour shows, suspense, things like that I made my own version in color, painting watercolors, but then I threw all that away and did other ones. And when I finally got into my Roman epic, which I never finished, I did show it to one person, and they didn't know what to make of it. But the main thing was that if the camera's booming down on a Roman legion entering the gates of Rome, the Roman wall, the first frame is a high angle, and you see them way in the distance. The second frame is over their backs, and you're going towards the gate, and the third frame is they're entering the gate. What they didn't understand is all one shot. And I explained it's moving. They said, no, it's still. I said, no, it's moving. In between the pictures, it moves. You see, now when I do a similar thing with the DP, and the DP looks and says, in between the pictures, we're going to move. I still got to light it, you know. But in my mind, the pictures moved. you know.
Now, is this kid who saw your Roman epic, did he later become aware that he'd seen the first Martin Scorsese picture?
Yes, he has, but he's not very impressed by it. It's all right. These are tougher guys, isn't that?
Now, it's the 50th anniversary of your breakthrough film, Mean Streets. Hold for applause.
Thank you.
I think it's worth mentioning, don't clap at everyone or we're going to be here all day. It's worth mentioning to this audience full of young filmmakers that even though it was your breakthrough movie, there's a long road to that breakthrough with various ups and downs along the way after your debut feature. You went back to NYU where you'd been a student to teach as a professor. You worked as an editor. You made a film with Roger Corman. Can you talk about the lead up to this movie and some of the elements that needed to come together to make Mean Streets?
I think what happened was that it's quite young and I guess you would call provincial, I think, or, you know, coming from a very small subculture in New York, and being at NYU, or at that time wasn't the NYU that it is now, it was much smaller, with 32 kids in the class, that's it. I came crashing up against the outside world, so to speak, and the cinema did a lot for me there, in that especially the New York Film Festival in '63 and '64. I was able to go to the press screenings because they showed one of my student films. So what I'm getting at is that I knew enough style and technique to play with editing and to design a picture, but what was I really saying? Did I have anything really to say at that point? I did. I didn't know how to do it. And the technique came first in these short films. And I think what really set me off was I wanted to make a film ultimately about my life or my friends in the Lower East Side in a certain way. Delicate issue because they're all gone now, not my friends, but a few of my friends. But that was a place that you really couldn't bring cameras, and people would be very, you can't mention certain names, you can't show certain things, and it was a delicate situation. So I had to be very careful, and so it became a very personal film. It became this film called Who's That Knocking? But that took 3 years, and it was made like a student film, and that I would shoot it on the weekends when we had the camera, which Harvey Keitel was his first acting job, and he finally got annoyed. He said, you know, I have a job. I think it was a what do they call it, a court clerk. And he said, you know, I'm going to get a haircut. I said, no, it's not going to match. It's not going to, it didn't matter. It didn't matter. He cut the hair, so one shot he's got long hair, next shot he's got, it doesn't, you know. But what happened was that I became overly, not overly, but I say really ambitious about what I wanted to do. I didn't know how to phrase it. And I really wanted to be, when I saw Before the Revolution, Prima della Rivoluzione by Bertolucci at the New York Film Festival, I wanted that. I wanted to be able to express myself that way. It had such a joy of not only filmmaking, but of life. And it had such depth of culture, but I don't come from that culture. I don't know the politics. I don't know, you know, we go back to Dante, go back to Petrarch, and you really, you know, and then you're dealing with the Charterhouse of Parma, all of this. But I wanted to be there, and I tried with Who's That Knocking right away, and I blew it completely. And I had to find a way of expressing myself from my own culture, ultimately. But what kept me going was, I think, the ambition and the determination to reach that level that I had seen in Before the Revolution, along with, but there was also Bellocchio's film, Fist in the Pocket, I Pugni in Tasca, and then, of course, the great Accattone by Pasolini, which was similar to a lot of the people I knew growing up. And so, but the poetry and the background of these people was the antithesis of where I came from. So I had to learn it myself, and I had to figure a way to make a film about kind of myself and a few of my friends without getting into difficulties. And that took from 66 to, I'd say, 72, with scripting and trying different ways. And one of the things I had to learn, especially when I went to California, was how to make a film. Meaning, if you're going to be in that situation, meaning if you're going to be making films, even independent films, meaning without a studio, you still had to utilize the equipment and the actors a certain way. You only have a certain amount of time and not finite money either. And so I had to learn, because prior to that, I would make a film when we had the camera. So I had to learn about scheduling. And I had to learn about trying to work within the schedule. But the trick was to get what you want within the schedule, which means a certain kind of planning and working with people who want to make the same film. So you're not arguing with actors in the morning before going out 2 hours, and then you lose 2 hours during the day. So, and a DP, for example, I think on Mean Streets we had 2 DPs, one in New York and one, I changed him when we got to LA. On Boxcar Bertha, the film I learned on, basically through Roger Corman. That's why I said he was an extraordinary university at the Corman Group. I had to shoot in 24 days with trains. A train, particularly in those days, whenever you have a train, a boat is worse. A train, at least a train, when you back it up, it's on the rails. A boat can go anywhere, So that's why Spielberg on Jaws, they went crazy with the boat, It was a nightmare. But in the case of the trains, when you want another take, it has to back up. Time. And the clock is ticking, and you got to back it up, and something goes wrong. So what Corman said to me was, do all the train shots in the first 4 days. And I said, wow, I had it all worked out. I had every shot drawn because I was nervous about not knowing where to place the camera on set. And I had it in my head, and I went to the locations, I worked it all out. That doesn't mean you didn't change it. At least I had a plan, and I had editing patterns worked out and that sort of thing. So I said, but that's the hardest thing. He said, that's why. So if you get the hardest thing over with, you break the back of the shoot right away in 4 days. And that's the end of it. And that's what we did. And I learned how to make a picture, a genre, a subgenre of a Bonnie and Clyde type film with, the great Barbara Hershey and David Carradine and Barry Primus and Bernie Casey. And we had a great time in Arkansas, shooting in Arkansas for 24 days. And so I applied that ultimately to Mean Streets. After doing Boxcar Bertha, I showed the film to John Cassavetes, who's, when I mentioned Bertolucci and Bellocchio and Shirley Clark and Pasolini, the one I neglected to mention, the key one for me was Cassavetes. And because he proved, that was there at the New York Film Festival when they said they're going to show faces, because what happened was that after his films in Hollywood, Too Late Blues and Child is Waiting, he kind of disappeared as a director. And they said, no, he was shooting, we heard stories about him shooting a film in his house in Mulholland Drive, Woodrow Wilson Drive, and all this sort of thing. And there it was, Faces. I was there the day it was shown at the press screening, and it was a revelation. And I realized you could do it, because I knew I could do it from Shadows, you see. And then, but Faces, what was interesting is that after Shadows, he ran into difficulty making films in the Hollywood style, and he stopped. He said, I got to start all over again. So there was a long pause, and he came back. And when I saw that, I said, that's where to go. That's what you do. And so I presented. I got to know him through Jay Cox and Verna Bloom, my old friends, and I presented the film to him. And I always tell the story, but he looked at me and he said, "Come here," and he hugged me, and he said, "You just spent a year of your life making a piece of junk. Don't ever do that again." I said, you like the actors are good and all that, but don't. Do you have something you write? I said, well, it's called, it became Mean Streets. It was originally called Season of the Witch. And I said, I do have the script. He said, try to get an actor involved and try to get that going. This was 1971. And through, again, Jay Cox and Verna Bloom, I met Jonathan Taplin, who was became the producer of Mean Streets. And somehow we got $650,000 from a man named E. Lee Perry to back the film. And I applied the same style and actually pretty much the same crew, Roger Corman's people, to make Mean Streets. Instead of 24 days, we had 25. That was it. And they said to me, if you really want to do this for a budget, we have so little money at that time, you got to shoot most of it in Los Angeles. And so I said, Okay, but this is a quintessential New York movie. You know, at first Roger Corman told me. Roger told me when I presented the script to him before they said shoot it in L.A. Roger said my brother Gene Corman just had this big hit with a film called A Cool Breeze, and at that time the blaxploitation films were being made, and he said if you could take this story and swing a little bit and make it black, and I said I'll think about it. And I walked out, and I said, no, I don't think so. I'm sorry, I just can't do it, you know? And so he was going to give me $150,000 to make it in New York as African-American. And so I said, just that doesn't quite, it's not the same thing. I said, all right. So we stayed with that, and I had his crew work out a system with me and get me the DP and the whole crew. And what I did was shot 7 or 8 days and nights in New York for specific places that we could not double in LA. You just couldn't. I tried. I looked everywhere. Even the alleys weren't. The alleys were nicer. Come on, really. Come on, we're the cobblestones, but nothing. So we found a few places downtown LA, Wall Street, 3rd Street, still pretty bad down there. And just for the night shot, a couple of night shots, like when the car crashes. But primarily, a lot of the interiors were done, a lot of them in Los Angeles, the bar and those sort of things. The key was bringing in the actors. The actors were quintessentially New York, East Coast people. And so just going back and forth with them. And we did it in 24 or 5 days, whatever.
Presumably it was fortuitous shooting in LA that some of the real-life counterparts in Little Italy didn't know that you were doing it.
You bet.
This is a perfect time to show a clip from Mean Streets.
All right, okay. Thanks a lot, Lord. Thanks a lot for opening my eyes. We talk about penance, and you send us through the door. Well, we play by your rules, don't we? Well, don't we?
Giovanino. Charlie, how are you? All right, how are you? I want you to meet 2 beautiful young ladies here. This is my good friend Charlie. This is my good friend Tony. He owns the joint. This is, what's your name again, Don?
Sarah.
Sarah Klein, right? Sarah Klein. This is Tony. And this is what? What's your name? Heather. Heather Weintraub, right? I met them in the village.
Bohemian.
Yeah, we know the Cafe Bazaar. So what do you want to drink? Go. Tequila. You got tequila?
No.
Never mind. Listen, have a 7 and 7. It's good for both of you. Don't give yourself a drink. Give Charlie and me J&B, will you, please? What's this? What's what? This. What?
Dad, what does this look like? Huh?
What?
Where'd you get this?
What?
Where'd you get this?
Where?
This.
What? This?
Yeah, in the back. Come on.
Hey,
Come on.
What are you doing? Hey, you're making me look bad, Charlie. One of the girls over here.
Oh,
What's
excuse
that?
me. Hey, I didn't mean to be rude, girls. Mr. Ciavello, I like your presence in the back room. If you got a moment or two.
What, you mean you request my presence for a moment or two in the back room?
I most certainly do.
Well, after you.
Nah, after you.
No, after you.
Hey, Mr. Ciavello, after you.
No, after you.
In the back. Tony, give the Mazza to whatever they want.
Hey, girls, excuse me. Hey, Tony, keep an eye on these nice girls here. Don't let none of the vultures look, okay?
What are you doing? What do you mean, what am I doing? What are you doing to me, huh?
What do you mean?
Michael's been on my back all night. He's bothering me. Why didn't you make your payment last Tuesday?
What do you mean? I made my payment last Tuesday. What are you talking about?
You paid him last week?
Yeah, I paid him last week. Well, what'd he say? He said I didn't pay him? He's a fucking liar. Where is he?
You paid him
Yeah, I paid him.
last week.
Yeah.
Last Tuesday.
Yeah. Charlie, you don't know what
He's here,
Where?
out front.
He's here?
Yeah.
So what do I care?
All right, let me go get him. We'll straighten this thing out, all right?
Hey, wait a minute, Charlie.
What?
Well, you're right.
I'm right.
Yeah, was it last Tuesday?
Yeah, that's the Tuesday. That was last week. That's before the one that's about to come up.
My mistake. I'm sorry. Forgive me. It was last week, the week before that I was thinking of, yeah.
Oh, yeah, it was, huh?
That's right. That's right.
What's the matter with you, Johnny? You
What?
can't go around bullshitting people that way. You give your word about something, you gotta keep it.
Hey, you don't know what happened to me. I'm so depressed about other things. I can't worry about payments. You know what I mean? I come home last Tuesday. I had my money, cash, you know? Blah, blah, bing, bing. I coming home. I ran into Jimmy Sparks. I owe Jimmy Sparks $700 like for 4 months. I gotta pay the guy. Lives in my building. He hangs out across the street. I gotta pay the guy, right?
Yeah?
So what happened? I had to give some to my mother, and then I wound up with 25 at the end of the week. And then what happened today, you ain't gonna believe, because it's just incredible. I can't believe it myself.
What?
I was in a game. I had like $600-700, right?
You gotta be kidding
Yeah, on
me.
Hester Street. You know Joey Clams?
Yeah.
Joey Scala, yeah.
I know him too, yeah.
Yeah, Joey Scala's Joey Clams.
Right.
Right.
They're the same person.
Yeah.
Hey.
Hey.
Oh, my God.
I gotta say,
Those boys.
a rare pleasure is to watch a clip from Mean Streets and see how much you're enjoying it.
Well, they're wonderful, the two of them, you know, and, you know, again, the scene in the bar and the Jumpin' Jack Flash and the character Johnny Boy's based on, actually he's still alive. He's not in New York, but he's still alive and carrying on, I think. But how should I put it? There's a playfulness with words that comes out of, well, just a kind of, if you think of it in terms of entertainment, I think in terms of Abbott and Costello or Bing Crosby and Bob Hope in the road movies, where Bob Hope was always the one being taken advantage of by Crosby. And so Road to Singapore has a wonderful scene, a couple of scenes that are very serious. They didn't think it was going to be a series, so they had different elements in that particular road movie. But those were, that inspired a kind of, we call it improvisatory, but it really isn't in a sense, because it's then structured and written down as best as possible. Like in the Goodfellas, you think I'm funny. That actually happened to Pesci. And he did exactly what Ray Liotta does. He says, yeah, you get the fuck out of here, that sort of thing. And he said, oh, okay, he made it. And what did he have to lose? At that point, he was dead. He could be dead either way. So he took a chance with this guy, and he got out of it. But it was terrifying because it changed like that. And so that kind of banter, so to speak, structured, joking, enjoying themselves, puffing up, and that sort of thing, was something that we did intentionally. And the nature of the Johnny Boy character, who owes so much money and comes around throwing it around as if, oh, yeah, it's not a problem, it's not a problem. You're supposed to make your payments, and takes him inside. That was a scene that was requested by De Niro, because that wasn't in the original script when they go in the back room. Mainly, he said, I think we should show how Johnny gets around Charlie. And Charlie trying to be the politician with all these people and these warring factors, where saving face is a big deal. It's not about, but saving face. And it's very dangerous. And I said, okay, what do you want to do? And now the thing about it is that De Niro knew the people I wrote the film about. And he knew, when he's mentioning Johnny Sparks, and he's changing names. Joey Clams, Joey Scala. Joey Scala's a real name, but Johnny Clams is not. It was a whole thing. And he's talking about later in there in a pool, and he's there, and they're playing cards in the hallway. And kid yelled at cops, and they suddenly grabbed the money. They lost all his money. Well, there's always card games going on in the hallways, certain hallways. And a lot of money was going down there, and then usually the cops would come around and get in a lot of trouble. So not me, but I would be there, so he used that, and he knew a lot of the people. we knew each other when we were 16. But he was hanging around with this other crowd on Kenmare Street, and we were on Prince and Mott, and his crowd was a little more at a place called the Alto Knights, which was a restricted club for members only. We had our own club for members only, but not like they had. This was... anyway, I always felt that they were a little more, attuned to maybe lining themselves up in life to I should put it this way, becoming part of that lifestyle. Okay, not him, but he was with them. And I remembered him. Later on, I met him again at Jay Cox's apartment with Verna and Brian De Palma, because Brian had worked with him in High Mom. And I remembered him. He said, I didn't realize it was him at first. And then after dinner, he sat down and he said, I know you. You used to hang out with Curdy and with Joe Morale and so-and-so. I said, yeah. And he said, I'm Bobby. You mean Bobby from Cameron? Yeah. And I didn't realize. And so that created a bond, I think, that when he explained, I should explain what's going on here. You should show me charming Charlie, and that Charlie just loves the guy, and for many different reasons. And I said, all right. And we improvised it in a hotel, wrote down some notes, and I had to squeeze it in the last day of shooting, and we shot the whole thing in an hour and a half. Part of it, I forgot some of the notes back at the hotel. It was like, so he had to remember everything, and he did. The problem was that the scene went on a very long time, and in the edit, I would show the film to a few friends here and there, and they always said, cut this scene down, cut it down. You don't need all this. You don't need the scene goes on too long. But I said, but it really is the foundation of the movie, actually, it turns out to be. And when I showed it to Cassavetes, he said, don't cut it. And at the last minute, Jay was with me, Jay Cox. I said, should I put the whole scene back in? Because we're going to show it to John, see what he thinks. He said, put it all in now. Let's see what he says. Because if he turns around and says it's going on too long, that's something, you know? And instead he said, don't touch it. And that's how the scene wound up in the picture, but it almost didn't. Although I think it would have eventually been that way. But it was a tricky thing at that time with showing your film to a few friends, you know. The other thing about that was that I decided at that point, because Mean Streets was a film made in 72, was shown in 73, and at that point the only way you saw movies was on a big screen. You saw them on television, but you didn't see movies like this on TV, because if you did, and eventually Mean Streets was shown on CBS late night movies, it was edited to the point where it was avant-garde. It was wild. So what the hell is going on in this thing? And whoa, you know, Rocco and his brothers that way too. And then Taxi Driver was the worst. It was cut down to 45 minutes. I'm not kidding. But at least it said edited for TV. No kidding. My God. So you don't make it for that audience. You're not going to make it for that audience. You make it for this screen. Therefore, I was able to, having had just seen again Red River on the big screen and The New Yorker a few years earlier, I realized again, of course, all the films I saw in the late 40s and early 50s meant for the big screen, so you could take a shot from below the knee up, and it'll hold. And it's very like Hawks. I love the way Hawks did that, and Ford, but primarily Hawks. And so with this scene, everything visually becomes a very in a static frame in a way, very, very controlled frame, showing as much as possible the full body. As opposed to other scenes in the film, which has a lot of camera movement, a lot of action, that sort of thing. But I felt confident because I knew that the film would only be shown on a big screen. And then within 8 or 9 years, it was the video that came into play, the ancillary markets, the Z channel in LA that showed a film uncut. But we never planned those shots for a small screen.
One thing we have to talk about in that clip, and if there's anybody in the room who has never seen that clip before, a scene where a major character walks into a room in slow motion, set to the intro of a song, it's worth pointing out that this man did it first.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
We have to give you the credit for that.
Thank you, because the whole soundtrack is that way. And I think it was the first film to use the sound. I don't know, with John Taplin and Perry, how they got the finances to buy 2 songs by the Stones and Clapton. Derek and the Dominoes, and it worked within the budget at that time. I think it was a situation where nobody had done it, and there was some of that in Easy Rider, but that's West Coast. They had motorcycles and long hair. Well, you had long hair too, but not that long. But what I mean is that it was a different cultural thing, Born to be Bad and that sort of thing. But that came from a whole other world. It's a big country, you know. There's a big difference in the coasts. And so this was a kind of urban soundtrack, in a way, that I don't think anybody had used, except, of course, in the short film, the great Kenneth Anger with Scorpio Rising, you know, which was, I think, only 35 minutes, but boy, it was a mind blower, you know.
After Mean Streets, you made Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, which is fantastic, and your first Hollywood studio production. But I'm always interested to read when you say that you never consider yourself a Hollywood guy.
Well, I didn't. I tried to be.
You have that great line. You have a great line in Curb Your Enthusiasm where you say, "I used to live in Los Angeles, but they asked me to leave."
Yes, they asked me to leave. They all lined up. They were outside the door. Could you leave now? When are you leaving? There's a plane outside. I said, no, we'll wait till tomorrow. Okay. No, really, that was like, you know, they asked me to leave around 79. 78, 79. You know, not just for the filmmaking. I mean, it was. What can I say? We were younger, and we were like, I was going through a teenage rebellion at the age of 26 and 27, in a way. Well, no, I mean, Mean Streets was done when I was 29. So I would think, right, I was 31, 32 is where I really blew out the gears, in a way.
Well, speaking of which, let's look at a clip from the explosive next collaboration with Robert De Niro, Taxi Driver. This is a somewhat famous scene.
Faster than you. Saw you coming, you shitheel. I'm standing here. You make the move. You make the move. It's your move. I'll try it, you. You talking to me? You talking to me? You talking to me? Well, then who the hell else are you talking to? Talking to me? Well, I'm the only one here. Who the fuck do you think you're talking to? Oh, yeah? Huh? Okay. Huh? Listen, you fuckers, you screwheads. Here is a man who would not take it anymore. Who would not let... Listen, you fuckers, you screwheads. Here is a man who would not take it anymore. A man who stood up against the scum, the cunts, the dogs, the filth, the shit. Here is someone who stood up. Here is... You're dead.
Wow. I haven't seen that in years. I haven't seen that in so long. Yeah.
I'm sure for like everybody here, that film is etched in my brain forever. And I actually picked it for my Sight and Sound Top 10 list, and I said it was so vividly powerful that you start to worry about the mental well-being of everybody making it. I mean, it's a serious question, though. What is the process of making a film like that that is so intensely felt?
Well, they're all all-consuming, I should say. But this was, from Paul Schrader's script, something I felt very strongly about. And again, Brian De Palma introduced me to the script, and they wouldn't take me seriously until I made Mean Streets. The producers and That's what Boxcar Bertha. No, it was just a Corman film, they felt. But when they saw De Niro and me in Mean Streets, they realized they could get the money, Michael and Julia Phillips, and I think Tony Bill, to get Taxi Driver made at a studio. And the reason why I say about not a Hollywood director, it's very, very difficult to get studio financing for these kinds of films. Mean Streets was an independent film. Alice you can get. Alice was a different story. Taxi was a major fight. And when I got to UA, New York, and Raging Bull and Last Waltz were easily accepted by them. It was a very different, that's why UA was so important at the time, United Artists. But in any event, the passion for the picture, maybe it had to do too with my own coming of age, so to speak, in life. My own anger and my own frustration. I don't know, being somebody who couldn't really defend myself in the streets that well physically. Having to find a way to survive through wits, songs, dances, and witty sayings, sort of thing, where I had to use my head to get in and out of situations, and knowing that there was a world out there besides where I came from, where very often the one who won, so to speak, who won the argument was by force. You know, not all the time, because I realized too the ones who didn't use force were more powerful. And here is a frustrated man. He's a man who has come from Vietnam, and he is overwhelmed with this passion. No, I had some passion. We had the passion for this. This character is very disturbing. You know what it was? I had read years ago when I saw, it was Richard Brooks's fault, because I saw Brothers Karamazov at the Radio City Music Hall. Now, it may not be a successful film, but it introduced me to Dostoevsky. So I just started reading Dostoevsky. And I read some of Karamazov, which I reread again 10 years ago. But, and I just reread Crime and Punishment. And you know, The Idiot is my favorite, and Karamazov. But the one that really hit me was Notes from Underground. And that's where I had my connection. Schrader, I think, had that in there too. But he comes from a different world, very different thing. And he also had Arthur Bremer's Diary and some other things. But I really connected with the underground man. I felt that I was him. A lot of people did when they read the Notes from Underground. And I was maybe looking for a way out. And I think if you get through all of Dostoevsky, you find that in Karamazov and The Idiot, particularly Karamazov, he finds the way out of being the underground man. But here we're stuck in the underground. And not only is he the underground man who turns violent, you know, crosses that line from sanity to insanity, he's rewarded for it. He's rewarded. And it's an ambiguous sense of celebrating the violent, you know? But we put ourselves into it, and we fought everybody. We fought everybody down the line during the shoot. It was a very hard shoot. When you hear those tracks of him improvising, you're talking to me, you hear those drums, that's outside. The people in the streets, it was a Colombian neighborhood or something, and they were all playing music and stuff. Today they would say, because there's a plane that goes over, you're talking to me, you have to loop it. I say, no, don't loop anything. Do this looping. Be careful. You know, I mean, Cassavetes re-looped Faces a number of times, but it's a different process because the technology now seems to be something everybody just, we can't have that. Well, maybe you can. You know, you're talking to technicians. No, you've got to be an artist. You've got to go past technology. The technology has got to be made to you to use. It's things where you try something crazy. You know, so the airplane is over that and all that noise. But Bob improvised, you talking to me. I asked him to talk into the mirror. There's a shot of him twirling the gun, which kind of comes from Shane. But primarily, I was at his feet, and I was just saying, do it again, and he would do it again, and then he just got into a rhythm, you know. Actually, it was I think it's the only scene I ever gave to an editor in Rush's form and walked out of the room and came back. This is in Hollywood. The editor was Tom Rolfe. And I said, see if you could just pull the best parts for me. And he was a real pro. It's one of the reasons he was great, but we didn't connect in terms of the Hollywood editors. the main thing was to keep the director out of the editing room, and I wanted to be in there too, of course, and I was part of it. And so, but this one time I was working with Marshall Lucas on the film, but he came in to do a little cutting. And I said, just try, I don't know this footage of him, you know, circling around, the camera circling around in slow motion, the thing slide, the gun coming out of his sleeve. See what you could just wean it down for me. And I gave it to him around 9 in the morning, 10 in the morning. And about 1 in the afternoon, he came back and said, I'll show you something. I looked at it, I said, don't touch it. It was great. And that's his cut of that. Not the last part. He said, I'm not taking credit for the repetition. He didn't like that. And the idea was to keep me out of the editing room as much as possible. But that was the one time that I looked at it and I said, oh, it's so beautifully constructed, what you did. I said, just leave it. Since Raging Bull, I've been working with Thelma Schoonmaker. It's different because we started back in documentaries. And what's great about Thelma a lot is that she has no film theory. She didn't bring anything to it. She brings it as just the passion, I should say, the philosophy of it, and really has no preconceived ideas about which filmmakers are more important, that sort of thing, what kinds of theories, whether it's auteurism or whether it's, I don't know, the latest theories of any kind of postmodern, whatever that is. So anything like that, she just looks at the footage. And so we could work together like we used to work in documentaries back in the 60s. And that's why I did that. But the film did, in the editing, I got it together, and then it was received very, very, very badly by the studio. And they said, cut it. Well, the problem was we got an X rating. And at that time, an X rating was deadly. But Midnight Cowboy had been released, and they had just won the Academy Awards. So UA told me, the guys at UA looked at me and said, Eric Pleskow and Mike Medavoy, they said, give it to us. Tell Warner, tell Columbia, we'll buy it, sight unseen, with an X, and we'll release it. In the meantime, they wouldn't even listen to me. They kind of threw me out of the room with a statement saying, cut it for an R or we cut it. I was furious, and I had no recourse to anything. Basically, it was Julia Phillips and Michael Phillips who talked them through, and finally got it. Granted, I remember Jerry Brown, Governor Jerry Brown, his father, Pat Brown, came in and talked about it to the censor board. They were concerned about Jodie Foster in it, but primarily it was the Columbia Pictures and the MPAA. I had to trim some of the violence at the end, not all, but I realized too that one way to get around the bloodbath, so to speak, and the blood on the walls in the film, I found when I was doing it looked fake to me. And so maybe that's rationalization, but what I did was I really wanted the film to be in this muted color scheme that John Huston and Oswald Morris worked out on Moby Dick back in '56. That was with the 3-strip Technicolor. They did something very special with that. And I wanted the whole film to be that way. So I used this as an excuse to try it. And so I drained some of the color out and made it slightly sepia and different. Each shot was slightly different. You had 15% color, 20% black and white. 50 color, 50 black and white. The next shot I said, we'll make that 70 color, 30 black and white, and vice versa. So each shot, so that the blood became more, like I did in Raging Bull, and the same thing in terms of the blood in black and white, to be less distracting. It gave the film the feeling of what I always wanted it to be, was a Ouija photograph on the cover of a tabloid, the Daily News or the Daily Mirror in New York. That's where I grew up. And my father only read those papers, not the New York Times. And so for me, that was the reality. And a couple of times, one time, one of the persons I knew was on the cover of that daily, dead, shot by the police. So it just stayed with me. And so I used that maybe as a rationalization, in a way, as compromising with the MPAA, but the film didn't need the red color. I felt it was stronger that way. I even kept the opening credit, I should say the opening logo of Columbia, grainy and tough. And whenever the film was restored, they said, we're going to fix that opening shot, the opening logo. I said, no, don't touch it. That's the way it should be, you know. But with those compromises, so to speak, we got as far as we could with the release, and that was the end of it. But the film stayed with me, and I think ultimately led to a 2.5 year, I say, delving into just a kind of loss of where was I going to go next? Where was I going to go? I tried with New York, New York. I tried many different things, but I didn't know where the hell I was going creatively. And it depressed me a great deal, and I almost lost out completely.
Well, it's interesting. I've seen in a lot of recent interviews that you've done, like you talk about fighting the good fight for grown-up cinema today, but in essence, you were doing exactly the same thing in the 80s. You know, you're maybe swimming against the tide of what your contemporaries were doing, or perhaps even what some audience wanted to see. And like, so they're classics now, but Raging Bull, King of Comedy, Last Temptation of Christ, all came with a personal sacrifice to make them. So there's an element of tenacity you have to have as a filmmaker to will these into existence.
I agree with the tenacity, and I think also a lot of it had to do with your behavior at times when you're making films, or after a film comes out and it's successful. I think part of it I realized too was I still had the desire to utilize film, make film, tell stories, but what story the hell I want to tell is really what was going on. And where was I going to go? The kind of stuff that was being made in the studio system, it just wasn't working for me. And they tried. We all tried together. It gave me different ideas, and I said no. But primarily it's the old song, nobody knows you when you're down and out. And when you're down and out, you get kicked. And it happened a lot. And I kept coming back, is what it was. And I was going to throw one more at you this way, and then another way. And ultimately, it's a battle, and it was not giving up. And maybe the films weren't as good as the ones that in the 70s, but it didn't matter. I had to get certain things made the way I wanted to make them. And I was lucky to find people who actually financed these things. You know, whether it was After Hours, and it was Warner Brothers and David Geffen, Amy Robinson and Griffin Dunn, or ultimately Last Temptation, you know, and even to a certain extent New York Stories, which was kind of enjoyable. At the same time, because of certain things that I did, I owed the studios certain films. I should say films. I'm going to say certain films. But for some reason in the mid-'80s, after Mike Ovitz took over my career and changed everything for me, he pointed out, you owe a film to Warner Brothers. How did that happen? What the hell is that? So, and anyway, somehow I owed a film to that became Goodfellas. So we twisted and turned it. And they all knew I wanted to make Last Temptation of Christ. I was starting on Goodfellas, and Terry Semel looked at me. He said, I know you, I finally got the financing for Last Temptation. And he said, I know you want to make that picture all of Hollywood knows. It was a long story. Go and make it, but you come back and finish this one. And that's what we did.
Before we talk about Goodfellas, which we don't have a clip of because, frankly, any member of the audience could get up here and recite any scene verbatim, which we're not going to do. But I do want to show a clip, one other Robert De Niro clip, of a film that, according to your TikTok with Francesca this week, is considered slept on at the time. I think he did very well. I don't know what sneaky links either. I don't know what sneaky links are either. Let's watch a clip from the amazing King of Comedy.
First of all, Miss Long, thank you very much for your help at the office and for passing this on to Jerry. I appreciate it more than you know. Now, Jerry, before I begin, I just want to thank you for listening to this material and for the opportunity you've given me. You know, lots of people think that guys like you, people who've made it, lose their feeling for struggling young talents such as myself. But now I know from experience that those people are just cynics embittered by their own failure. I know, Jerry, that you are as human as the rest of us, if not more so. Oh, well, I guess there's no point in going on about it. You know how I feel. So let's get on with the show, The Best of Rupert Pupkin. Jerry, I've sketched out this little outline in order to save you a little bit of time, okay? It's a little introduction. So close your eyes And imagine it's exactly 6 o'clock, you're standing in the wings, and we hear Lou Brown and the orchestra strike up your theme song.
And now, from New York, it's the Jerry Langford Show, with Jerry's guests, Richard Pryor, Ben Gazzara, Elizabeth Ashley, Carol Burnett,
And the comedy find of the year, making his television debut, Rupert Pupkin, the new king of comedy.
Rupert! Are
Hello.
you crazy?
Say
What's
hello
the matter
to
with you?
Jerry.
Ah,
People
Mom!
are sleeping. Lower it. What's the matter with you?
Mom!
Take it easy. Lower it.
I'm not gonna lower it. I have to do this now.
I don't mind you playing it, but lower it.
Now, you come on, Jerry, and you do your monologue, and then when the time comes, this is how I see you introducing me. You could say something like this. Will you please give your warmest welcome to the newest king of comedy, Rupert Pupkin.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rupert Pupkin. I was born in Clifton, New Jersey, which was not at that time a federal offense. Is there anyone here from But the fact is that no one is allowed to be born too. Because once you fall below a certain level,
Can you tell everybody who Rupert's mother is?
That's my mother. And that's improvised. That's what I was listening to, watching British films on TV. Lower that. You know, late at night. People are trying to sleep. And he improvised the whole thing. That was the only time I ever saw De Niro crack up, laughing. Because at one point he said, if they come down here and touch my stuff, I'm going to get a killer attack dog. And she goes, that'll be another mouth to feed. And then he started laughing. I wonder what he was doing. He was going, shoulders were shaking. But she didn't care. She was upstairs, and she just is yelling at him. But I'd forgotten that. I'd forgotten all about that. That's pretty interesting. And you see what happened when the film came out.
I got to say, I love watching you watch the clips, and you turn to me when there's a great shot and go, wow.
It's interesting. No, I forgot about the audience thing. I forgot about all that. But the thing about it is when the film was made, I was having a little trouble shooting the film. It took me about a long time to shoot it. And I think I was having trouble coming to terms with myself, too. How much of me is Rupert? How much of me is Jerry? How much wants to be Jerry? But Jerry is a mess, too. I mean, all this going on. And maybe it was a little too close to home, and it was extremely uncomfortable. It was very fine. Bob was fine, and Sandra Bernhard and everybody, and Jerry. But I had difficulty shooting it because of that, and in the editing, too. But finally, myself, Thelma, and Michael Powell actually was there, too, helping out in a way and giving us support to finish the film. But the key was when the film opened, the people expected something from the combination of De Niro, Scorsese that was not this. And it was soundly rejected, except by some critics, the New York Times, Time Magazine, I think, in New York. I remember the LA critic at the Times said, when the film came out, this is the best American film so far this year. The only thing was February. So that's nice of her, you know. But by the end, the film was decimated ultimately by Entertainment Weekly. Was new, and as I would tell the story in the TikTok, actually, it was New Year's Eve, '83 to '84, and the film didn't do well, and I'm putting my tie on to go to, again, Jay Cox's apartment to have New Year's Eve, and I said, and then the TV, Entertainment Weekly or Entertainment Tonight was on. It was a new show, too. And it was the beginning of, like, People magazine celebrity business that was really going to go through the roof, as we know. And it said, and now the flop of the year. And I looked over, and a curtain opened. There was my poster And I, oh, wow, you know. So then I went into, and also at that same time, my first venture into making Last Temptation of Christ had been canceled. And I couldn't even, I had to move back to New York. I mean, really move back to New York and stay there. I took everything out of the house that I was renting. I was there with no films, nothing, gone. And so After Hours came out of that. I'd start all over again, in a way, to learn how to make a film where you need less money and less crew. You follow? And less shooting days.
I mean, I think you took some of that principle into Goodfellas, and that film was not rejected, a huge critical commercial success. I mean, I would say that it's one of the most influential films of all time. Some filmmakers have made their entire careers out of ripping it off. So 2 questions. One is, are you flattered by the homages or outright theft of techniques in Goodfellas? And 2, when you were making it, did you have any idea of the legacy that it would have now?
No, not at all. Not at all. I wanted to be like a stand-up. I like stand-up. And because a stand-up is the bravest thing you could do, I think, you know. Because if they don't like you personally. It's you. There's nobody else with you. You know, oh, well, the cameraman did that, and the other actor, no, it's you. Get out of here. Yeah. And so, like, you're up there, and you're ripping your guts out, and it's funny. You're making fun of yourself, usually. And I wanted it to be like that. I wanted it to be as fast and as fast meaning, and I know I'm speaking too fast right now, but we have a short amount of time. I'm trying to get as much in. But the thing about it is, I wanted to be as revealing as the way it was written in the book that Nick Pileggi put together from Henry Hill. And I said, why can't it be as offhanded as that? And taking offhand meaning a sense of riffing freedom, where you tend to go off on a tangent and not sure if you're ever going to come back to main theme, but somehow you rail it in, you bring it in. And it's really a matter of pacing and timing. And very much the same way as, like the first 2 or 3 minutes, I always say, of Jules and Jim, which I said, what if the whole movie's like that? 2 hours, 10 minutes, the whole film at that pace. Because it's not a matter of consuming an image, it's being overwhelmed by it. Being overwhelmed by a frame of mind, being overwhelmed by the star of the movie. I remember one famous critic said, it's Scarface without, condemning the film, it's Scarface without Scarface. I said, that's right. It's about the whole lifestyle. That's the star. The star of the movie, when the Henry Hill is our, Virgil taking Dante down through the lower depths. He never makes it to even purgatory, but he tries to get there. So in a way, is it a documentary? Or I'm not quite sure. That's why I always make documentary or films that are considered documentaries around the same time. I'm trying to say that, well, there really isn't ultimately no such thing anymore as a documentary. I think it's a film. It's different from Humphrey Jennings. It's different from Grierson. That's a specific thing. There are films like that made now for specific reasons and more journalist cinema, I think. But why can't it just be a film if it's music? Let's say the film we just did on David Johansen, Personality Crisis, One Night Only. Was basically him at the Cafe Carlyle in New York with some flashbacks. But why can't it flow like a piece of music? Why does it have to have a structure of beginning, middle, and an end? I know Godard said every film should have a beginning, middle, and an end, but not necessarily in that order. So, but what if you do start at the end? And what if you do start in the middle? What if so it's interesting playing with the form, and I find that trying to make films that are nonfiction are really movies too, like the George Harrison Living in the Material World, which opened up, gave me a sense of pushing narrative, if I could, as far as I could. I forget the film. I think I was making Hugo, but that's different. That was a very clearly cut picture. It was made with a lot of love for my childhood, my daughters and my grandchildren and that sort of thing. But I think Departed, for example, was influenced by the nonfiction films I was making. The only problem with Departed is that I had to keep sticking to the plot, which was really hard.
Well, to jump into this century, which sounds very strange to say, but like you made at the start of you made 3 films with Leonardo DiCaprio, as sort of a new creative collaborator in the same way as Robert. And am I right in thinking that Robert De Niro was the person who introduced Leo to you?
Yes, he did. He actually, he never usually said you should work with this person or that person. But one day, he did, on a phone call about something else, he did say, hey, I just did this film called This Boy's Life, and they had this kid, Leo DiCaprio. You should meet him. You should work with him sometime. He's really good.
I think it's always a thing I think is interesting about the films you did with Leo in this period. I say Leo like he's my friend, sorry. But I think it's interesting the films you did is that he seemed at that time, he's the hottest actor on the planet, and he's running away from his matinee idol status in Titanic and into your arms as somebody like, you're a fearless filmmaker and he's an actor that then is willing to do whatever you want him to do. He's completely fearless
Well,
too.
as much as possible. Again, it was Mike Ovitz who put it all together, who brought Rick Yorn as our manager, and now he's my manager, and Leo DiCaprio to me, because Leo really liked the films I had made, particularly the stuff with Bob De Niro. And ultimately, it was Leo who, his participation in Gangs of New York, that got that film made. And so I think whatever Leo was bringing to it, all I know is that he got the film made, in a way. And so whether I was ready or not to make the film, I'm not quite sure, because I was so tied to those stories. I don't know if I ever finished it. That's not an apologia. It's just something that's always on my mind about that time period. It's kind of extended into Killers of the Flower Moon to a certain extent, at least the thinking, not necessarily the behavior, but meaning use of narrative that way, and tying many different threads together. But I found that Leo, by the end of the shoot, was really open to trying anything, pretty much. And I didn't really understand completely the image, let's say, from which you say he was trying to change. I only saw Titanic once, and I brilliantly made film. All I know is he seemed much younger in it to me, and he was trying, I think, in Gangs to look a little older. But the real key is when we worked on Aviator. After completing Gangs in New York, I felt that something was taken off my shoulders. Whether I was completely satisfied with it or not, didn't matter. It was done. It was done. Under those circumstances, that was the best I could do. And suddenly they said, what do you want to do next? I said, I want to make a movie next. Meaning maybe material that I hadn't worked with before, that I hadn't thought about. Because the next thing for me was silence. But I hadn't worked out the script yet. I had something, but it wasn't quite right. And I needed more thinking, more internalizing with silence. And so they sent me a script, said, don't read the title page. And it was Aviator, and I read it, the first 5 pages, and I see these guys making a film. And then I said, oh no, it's Howard Hughes. I don't want to do that. I said, well, because Warren Beatty and Spielberg, they always want to do Howard Hughes. But then as I read it, I enjoyed it so much, John Logan's script. And it also dealt with Howard Hughes in the early days as an aviator and also as a filmmaker. But also he was afraid of mixing the peas on his plate with the meat. And he was afraid of touching a doorknob. Now there's something. So now we get into this. And also, I'm not a great flyer. So I wanted to learn more about flying. Seriously, I got into it. And not that I'd ever be a pilot or anything, but I'm still not great at it. But I wanted to know more about this man who gets in a little silver tube and then lands in a beet field. Or tries to land a bigger plane in the Beverly Hills golf course and lives through the accidents that occurred, maybe 4 times that he had such trauma to his brain. What deep secret in him was keeping him from touching that doorknob? What was his psychological makeup? Also that John Logan was able to navigate the extraordinary palette of different women through his life. And he was able to focus it on Katharine Hepburn and a bit on Faith Demerg and, of course, a little bit on Ava Gardner. And so that simplified that area because the same passion, I think, was there for everything he did in his life. And I was fascinated by that. And during that process, I think, looking back at it, I think Leo as a person, he grew. He just grew as we were making the film. And there was a maturing of him as a person, and also in the film, too, towards the end. It really was. I remember him sitting there in that white leather chair, which is based on the real screening room of Howard Hughes. And he's naked, and he's sitting there, the beam of light behind his head. And he says, bring in the milk, bring in the milk, bring in the milk 10 times. And he's got a beard and long hair, and his nails are growing. And at one point, a lot of the times, people were saying, I think you have to show the old Howard Hughes in Vegas. You have to show, I said, no, if you show the old guy with the beard and all that, that's a whole other film, I said. This is more interesting. That would be an interesting film if you stayed there and if you really build on it. But we don't have that here. And so there was a lot of talk about it. And finally, when we shot that scene, which took quite a while, because it took a few days because of the makeup, because he had been burned in the plane crash. I think we shot it. And by the way, the film was shot on schedule. It was a 90-day shoot, but it was on schedule. It was a tough shoot. But after I looked at the rushes, I told Leo, I said, take a look at this because it's the old Howard. We don't need to shoot anything more on Howard. This is what he becomes. He's there in the screening room, writhing on the floor, you know, with scenes from Hell's Angels and the Outlaw projected on his back, you know. Saving his urine in the bottles. It's important because the acidity in the urine is important. Okay, he's not going to leave that room. You know, he's got definite, you know, all the rituals as to taking one piece of paper out of his pocket and putting it in another. It's very important. Otherwise, the whole world's going to collapse.
Before we get on to talk about Killers of the Flower Moon, I'd just like to show a clip from one of your films with Leonardo DiCaprio. We're going to see a clip from Wolf of Wall Street.
Oh, okay.
It's one of my favorite scenes.
Hello, John. How you doing today? You mailed in my company a postcard a few weeks back requesting information on penny stocks that had huge upside potential with very little downside risk. Does that ring a bell? Oh, yeah, I may have sent it. Okay, great. Well, reason for the call today, John, is something just came across my desk, John. It is perhaps the best thing I've seen in the last 6 months. If you have 60 seconds, I'd like to share the idea with you. You got a minute? Name of the company, Aerotine International. It is a cutting-edge, high-tech firm out of the Midwest awaiting imminent patent approval on a next generation of radar detectors that have both huge military and civilian applications. Now, right now, John, the stock trades over the counter at 10 cents a share. And by the way, John, our analysts indicate it could go a heck of a lot higher than that. Your profit on a mere $6,000 investment would be upwards of $60,000.
Jesus, that's my mortgage, man.
Exactly, you could pay off your mortgage.
This stock will pay off my house.
John, one thing I can promise you, even in this market, is that I never ask my clients to judge me on my winners. I ask them to judge me on my losers because I have so few. And in the case of Aerotine, based on every technical factor out there, John, we are looking at a grand slam home run.
Okay, let's do it. I'll do $4,000.
4,000, that'd be 40,000 shares, John. Let me lock in that trade right now and get back to you with my secretary with an exact confirmation. Sound good, John?
Yeah, sounds good.
Great. Hey, John, thank you for your vote of confidence, and welcome to the Investors Center.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
How'd you fucking do that?
Just like that, I made $2,000. The other guys looked at me like I'd just discovered fire.
Now,
Whoa.
tell them who was the voice on the phone.
That's me. I bought those shares. Well, look, we made him president, so.
I mean, it's similar to what you were saying. I mean, there's a link actually to Killers of the Flower Moon here in terms of, you know, it's similar to what you were saying with Taxi Driver. You know, some of your films, people are punished for their sins, and in Wolf of Wall Street, they are celebrated.
No, they become, I mean, like, in a sense, you know, saying that politically, the country, they elected him.
Yes. Well, I mean, it's, why, that's not controversial.
No, because it's about kill, go, get the money, lie, do anything you want. You can't do anything to me. I have all the, you know, when you say, listen, I don't have to pay taxes to a certain extent because I have smart lawyers. Right, it's true. It's legal, doesn't mean it's right. But it's legal. So,
I mean,
that's the thinking right there in that movie.
I mean, the link to the current movie, speaking of wars, this is the first starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro together in a film of yours, is also about predators, killers of the flower moon. Now, a lot of the audience won't have seen it, but it's about such an ugly chapter in American history and still an open wound. But I'm ashamed to say that until the book came out, I wasn't really aware of the oil boom in the Osage Nation in the 20s or the murders that follow. So is this a chapter of history that had essentially been covered up to some extent?
Completely, yeah. I mean, when it was happening, there were a lot of articles in, something with like Penny Dreadfuls, I guess, or kind of a popular press. But there were also articles in Harper's Magazine, which were actually much more thorough and more realistic, and actually pointed out the difficulties and the troubles they were having. But the big thing was that it was well known throughout the country of the rich Native Americans, even in musical numbers in movies in the 50s. There was always a number with Native Americans dancing around with oil shooting up behind them. But the thing about it was by the 1958, nobody remembered it, except when they made a film, which was ultimately a film of support for Hoover and the FBI, called The FBI Story. And Mervyn LeRoy directed it. And it basically is, Jimmy Stewart's in it, and it basically is a series of the greatest hits of the FBI. Again, very much the issue of the 1930s, the 20s and 30s, of Hoover working out, dealing with American crime, which had to do with Ma Barker and her brood, Babyface Nelson, Pretty Boy Floyd, G-Men coming in, Bonnie and Clyde, and that's what the last of the American outlaws, ignoring completely that apparently there was this very big crime syndicate that came from the Mediterranean working in America. He didn't know about it, apparently. So he concentrated primarily on the local outlaws, the last of the Jesse James or the Al Jennings or that sort of thing. And in so doing this film, he hit these extraordinary actual vignettes. There may be 15, 20 minutes each one. The film is about over 2.5 hours. And it has some beautiful things in it, the film, some beautifully staged scenes. But one of the sequences is the Osage murders. And I think it's 15 minutes in the film. Unfortunately, it portrays the Osage as humiliation for them. Ray is portrayed, how they're spending money, how funny they are. They don't realize what, a man has 3 pianos in his room. And it really was an offensive work at that time, which we all accepted. I was 15 or 16 years old. That's what we thought in New York. We didn't know. We thought everything had been settled with Native Americans and indigenous. We didn't understand. And they do have scenes with the house blowing up and that sort of thing. In fact, although people haven't seen the film, I don't want to give it away, but I thought of actually recreating the shooting of that film towards the end of my film, but instead I went another way.
Yes.
Yeah. But that was the only time, and that was always looked upon as those indigenous people who don't understand what money is and don't understand about the manifest destiny. Oh, wait, of course not. And it was really, really presented in an awful way. But it was almost like a cartoon in a way. The film really builds up beautifully for the killing of the big one, John Dillinger, at the Biograph Theater in Chicago. That's quite a sequence. It's beautifully made. But aside from that, the sequence on the Osage was unfortunate.
I mean, in collaboration with the Osage Nation, you changed the focus of the film from the book somewhat. I mean, that is what,
We had to. I tried to make it. I mean, I grew up watching Westerns, and I loved Westerns because, I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't go near animals. I couldn't run. I couldn't. So, because of the asthma. And for me, that's where I saw the outdoors. Whenever they tried to take me to a place, a park or whatever, I started to get an asthma attack or sneeze or get into an allergic reaction to all the nature around me. And so for me to see it on the screen, where animals are on the screen and beautiful horses, palominos and paint horses, this was a heaven for me to see this. Again, the American Western ended with the Wild Bunch. So that was that. That ended part of the history of America, too, in a way. And so the Western, from that point on, I don't know what that is. It's something else. Would I be interested in doing a revisionist Western to show that Wyatt Earp really wasn't that good a guy? Who cares? Nobody cares. I mean, we could see it. Ford hits it, and even in Two Rode Together, you get some of that. And like you could see it on television maybe, or in a documentary, or a journalistic documentary, but like who cares, really? If you do so, then you have to find something deeper in Earp, and deeper in the Clantons, and deeper in that whole way of thinking. And I think that's what this afforded me, this story. I tried to push through and have the story in the film, approach the story from the point of view of what David Grann did in the book beautifully, which was from the Bureau of Investigation. They weren't called the FBI at that point. They came in from Hoover. He sent them in. And Hoover wasn't Hoover at that time. It was just beginning. And he had no choice because the place blew up. The house blew up. And I tried to do it, and Leo was going to play Tom White, who was the federal agent. But I found that after 2.5 years working on the script with Eric Roth and making Irishman during the same time, I found that I really, both Leo and I couldn't find a way to see anything different or new that we could project in Tom White, who is the FBI, ultimately, the Bureau of Investigation agent. And if he couldn't find it, and I tried my best with Eric, who tried the script so many different ways, and a lot of people liked the script that we had. At one point he came to me, it was right before COVID hit, and the pandemic really knocked a lot of stuffing out of us, so to speak, and we had to really rethink the picture. But I was glad that I had that time to rethink it, because he said to me, "Where's the heart of the movie?" And I immediately said, "Well, it's Molly and Ernest, because they're in love." And I found that out from hanging out with the Osage in Oklahoma, because they point out, it isn't as simple as people coming in and shooting and poisoning. It's people's trust, and it's the betrayal of trust. And they said, don't forget that, you have to understand that Ernest and Molly, despite everything, they were in love. Well, not to give away anything in the film, then if I show in that love relationship an incredible kind of betrayal of trust, then that's the story, because that's the essence of what they were doing with the Osage Nation, basically, because they would say, well, they don't understand money. It was, I think, a European sensibility and, to a certain extent, very religious Protestant, I think, idea of, sowing and reaping. You work for your rewards in life, and you get them. Well, these natives, they're just standing on the land. The oil came out. They didn't work for it. So they don't deserve it. And on top of that, they don't even really understand money. Like, I can charge you $1 for this glass of water. They'll pay it. Then a week later, I say it's $2. They'll pay it. You know what? I'm working. They're not. What if we charge $25? They pay it. So I get a little bit off the top. That makes us all complicit. See, and how the insidious nature of complicity, it seems to find its way into, next thing you know, it's genocidal. And that's what I wanted to get at in the movie. And we do it. When Leo turned to me and he said, well, if the heart of the picture is Molly and Ernest, then I should play Ernest. I said, oh, okay. Okay, if you want to play Ernest, and this means we're going to make this picture, we have to take the script and rip it inside out, which is what we did. And we did it to I must say, the last day of shooting.
They told me you was going with Matt Williams for a time.
You talk too much.
Oh, I don't talk too much. Just thinking who I got to beat in this horse race, that's all.
I didn't realize this was a race. I don't care for watching horses.
Well, I'm a different kind of horse.
On kashi. Shomikasi sheko shiajimi.
What was that?
Shomikasi. That's how you are.
I don't know what you said, but it must have been Indian for handsome devil.
I feel like, so in a lot of kind of, recent interviews, the subject of the current climate of cinema comes up, and you're asked to give a State of the Union, and I feel it's perhaps a little unfair that you're seen as the last line of defense.
I didn't want to be the last line of defense, because I honestly think it's thrown back now at all you in the sense that, and I really mean this, that I don't know where cinema's going to go. Why does it have to be the same as it was for the past 90, 100 years? It doesn't. Do we prefer the ones from for the past 90 years? I do, but I'm old. Younger people are going to see the world around them. You guys are going to see it in a different way. You're going to see it fragmented. You're going to see it, I don't know. You come from another country, you see it in one long take. What does that take? What does a shot mean now? What does one shot mean? I don't know anymore. I don't think it means anything. So therefore, it's a complete, like we took the script of Killers of the Flower Moon and turned it inside out. And that's what's happened with cinema now. So it's really up to everybody. You're all in the process of a period of reinventing it. It's quite extraordinary time. And a lot of it has to do with the technology. I mean, if I was able to have a digital or even just video, a really good video before digital, I would have shot Mean Streets in that way. I wouldn't have to pay for the lights and the camera to a certain extent. Yeah, we would have still had to design the lighting, but not as difficult, I think. It might give us a sense of freedom. With the technologies, what happened with Cassavetes and Shirley Clarke, they shot their pictures, Shadows, for example, with the 16mm Eclair. That gave us the impetus. Well, you don't need the Mitchell BNC. You don't need the giant cranes. It'll be nice for certain shots, but you don't need it for everything, which means we don't need the studio. So that's the freedom you have now. It's so much freedom that I think you have to rethink what you want to say and how you want to say it, and use that technology. Ideally, what I hope is that, I hesitate to use the word, but serious film could still be made with this new technology and this new world we're part of, this even more dangerous new world, so that it can be enjoyed by an audience of this size on a big screen. That's the key. I'm afraid that the other films, the spectaculars, or the, what are they called, franchise films, will be taking over the theaters. I always ask for the theater owners to maybe, create a space where younger people would say they want to see this new film, which is not a franchise film, in a theater, sharing it with everybody around them, so that they want to go to the theater, that it's something inviting. It doesn't get you to the point where you say, oh, I could see it at home. You follow? Because the experience of seeing a film with a lot of people is really still the key, I think. But I'm not sure that that could be easily achieved at this point.
You still want people to be film directors, not content providers.
No, yeah, the content means it's something you eat and you throw away. Content is like, it's candy. I don't know what content, it's madness to think you're making content. Content means, when I have the TV on, I like having it on all the time. That's when I was growing up, that's the way it was. And now, of course, I keep TCM on as much as possible. But if not, there's some, every now and then there's a channel that's showing certain, Halloween is nice, they show all the horror films and things. So you just have it on. I don't have the sound up, but that's content. It becomes content, you see. It's something that you have, it's almost like when radio before television. The radio was on in America all the time. There was a voice going on in the background. Or often people keep a TV on to hear a voice. That's all that is. But if you want to have an experience in which can enrich your life, it's different. You can't be thought of as content.
Well, on behalf of everybody here, I'd just like to say thank you for your films. Thank you for all you've done for cinema. And thank you for all you continue to do for cinema. Ladies and gentlemen,
thank you,
Mr. Martin Scorsese.
Thank you. Thank you.